Guys, this is Mr. Katz. First thing I want you to do is I want you to take out your calculator. And when you go to your calculator, you can go to All Programs, and it's under Window Accessories, and make sure your calculator's out. The next thing, there's going to be a couple times during this that I'm going to ask you to pause the screen. When you pause the screen, you just go, at the very bottom of your screen, there will be a pause button. Make sure you do so. And make sure you follow along. There's going to be a couple different things that you have to do. For example, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pause the screen, and I want you to come up to me and get a piece of paper. Again, so do that now. All right. Now that you paused, please remember that you got to work at your own pace, but you have to work on your own, which means that if you don't get something, you have to try your best, but you have to work on your own. Please make sure you pause and rewind the video when you don't understand something, but this is pretty self-explanatory, so when you get to a problem that you don't understand, go back and rewatch and re-listen to the video. Alright, so now that you got your piece of paper, I want you to look at this pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to figure out the next three terms in each pattern. So in this pattern, this is really, really easy. You can tell just by looking at it that it's plus 2, plus 2. You're adding 2 every time. But one thing that you have to understand is that when you don't know patterns, and you notice that it's going up as you move to the right, it could be addition. And the way to know that it's addition is to take the two numbers and to see what's between them by subtracting the bigger minus the small. And you get 2. And then if you take the next two numbers and do the same thing, and if you get the same answer, that means it's definitely addition. So sometimes it's not as easy like this one below, but you use the same concept. If you see that the numbers are going up, it's possible that it's addition. So this is where you can use your calculator, but I'm going to do it by hand. So if it's addition, that means that you should be adding the same thing every time. So it's 13 minus 12.3. Notice how I line up the decimals. And you end up getting 0.7. Well, we're going to do the same thing because it has to work for every single one. So now we're going to do 13, the bigger number, minus the smaller number. And again, you get 0.7. So if you end up getting the same thing, it means that it is addition, or it could be subtraction, but in this case, the numbers are going up. So every time you're adding 0.7. So to get to the next term, you would take 13.7 and add another 0.7, and you get 14.4. And you would do that to do all of them. So now what I want you to do is I want you to try this one on your own, and then pause the screen, and then as soon as you're done, bring it up to me to check. Okay. So now that you pause the screen, now that you've already checked, now we're going to work on subtraction. So if the numbers are going down, like these are, you're going to actually use the same concept you learned in addition. If your numbers are going down, you still want to know how much is between those numbers. So you could do 14 minus 8.4. And we're going to make that 14.0. And you end up with 5.6. Well, we're going to take the next two numbers. And again, you take the bigger number, and we're going to subtract the smaller number. And again, you get 5.6. Well, that means that it's addition or subtraction, but in this case, it's subtraction. You have to end up getting the same thing each time. So I know that each time you're subtracting 5 and 6/10. So to get the next term, I'm going to take, now this is where it gets tricky, 2.8 minus 5.6. Well, remember, if you have this, if you only have 2 and you're subtracting 5, you're going to get a negative answer. So we keep change, and you get negative 5.6 plus 2.8. Well, when one of them's negative and one of them's positive, you're going to subtract the bigger minus the smaller. And you get 2.8, but remember, because there were more negatives, it's a negative 2.8. You get that same answer if you use the calculator. Watch. 2.8 minus 5.6. So you get a negative 2.8. So you know your answers are then going to be negative. And then you would keep going. So you would do negative 2.8 minus another 5.6, and you keep going and going and going. Alright, now what I want you to do is do this problem right now. Pause the video, and I want you to do it, and then bring it up to Mr. Katz, to me. Alright, now that you brought it up and you got it right, now you're ready to move on to the next problems. So sometimes when the numbers are going up, it's not addition. So in this case, if you got this problem and you had to find the next three terms, the first thing you would do would see if it's addition. So you would do 0.9 minus 0.6, and you get 0.3, and then you take the next two, and you would notice 1.35 minus 0.9, notice I'm lining up the decimals, you actually don't end up getting the same thing. So if you don't end up getting the same thing, that means you're not adding the same thing, which means it's not addition. So the next thing to do is see if it's multiplication. Now the way you know if it's multiplication is you take the same two numbers, but you divide them. So I can see the numbers are going up, but I'm going to take 0.9 and divide it by 0.6. 0.9 divided by 0.6. And I get 1.5. So when you divide, that means that there's 1.5 times between them. So it means I'm going times 1.5. But in order for this to be a pattern, I have to make sure it works for the next one. So I'm going to take the 1.35 and divide it by 0.9. 1.35 divided by 9. I'm sorry, 0.9. And I get, oops, sorry, I didn't do 0.9. 1.35 divided by 0.9. You're going to notice you get that same 1.5. So if you're dividing and you get the same number, it means since the numbers are going up, you're actually multiplying by 1.5. Remember, you do the opposite to see if it works. So to get to the next number, you're just going to do 2.025 times 1.5. Now I want you to try these two problems right here, but pause the screen right now and try those two problems and bring it up to me. All right. So now that you did those two problems, the same thing goes with division. So again, in order to know if it's so, first of all, you would check to see if it's subtraction. And in this case, when you subtract the bigger minus the smaller, and then the bigger minus the smaller, you don't end up with the same answer. So it must be division. So I'm going to take the bigger number and divide the smaller number. 225 divided by 45. And then I'm going to take these two, and I'm going to do 45 divided by 9. And each time you will get an answer of 5, which means that it is, but it's not multiplication, it's division here. You're dividing 225 by 5 and by 5. So you're just going to keep dividing by 5 to get the next terms. Same thing goes here. First of all, I would check to see if it's subtraction. So I would do 12.5 minus 6.25. I'd get an answer, and then I would do the next two. 6.25 minus 3.125. What you're going to notice is that you don't get the same answer, so it's not subtraction. Well, if it's not subtraction, maybe it's division. So I'm going to take the bigger and divide it by the smaller one. 12.5 divided by 6.25. And I get 2. Okay, so it has to work for the next one. And if you take 6.25 and divide it by 3.125, you will also get 2. So because you get the same thing, that means the pattern is dividing by 2. So to find the next two terms, or three terms, you would just keep dividing by 2 and dividing by 2. Alright, so now here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause the screen, and I want you to do these 8 problems on your own. And I want you to, every two problems you do, I want you to bring them up to me to check, and then go back and sit down and do the next 2. Make sure you do them on your own and try your best. Use the strategies that we talked about. Now when you're done and you get them all right, I'm going to give you a website that you can go on to do, it's actually an 8th grade pattern challenge where you're actually picking out people. But you have to finish this first and get it right on your own in order to get the website. But as soon as you're done with all, you're going to do 2 and then get it checked. And then as soon as you're done with all 8, I will give you a actual list of a website to go on when you're done.